So I am hopefully recording this session now. So I have the ability to share the screen. So I have a PowerPoint presentation, hopefully a short one. And please, as I'm going through this and talking about the link simulation, feel free to ask questions as we go. Otherwise, you know me, I'll talk 100 miles a minute at least. So just say, I have a question and jump in and we'll handle it there. I will, as I said, this session is being recorded. I'll send it out to everyone, but if you have attended this session, please don't feel like it's necessary or you'll learn anything by looking at it again. We'll have a chance when I'm there next week on Thursday to have any questions answered or any other things that you might have at that point in time. So without any further ado, I'm going to share the screen and I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint presentation. This is posted on the Canvas system, and it should say Link Simulation Introduction, and I just want to do a quick check to make sure two things. First of all, can you hear me? And well, it's two questions in the first one. If you can hear me, and I want to make sure that I'm not too loud.
Yes, perfect.
Volume's good. And I'm assuming that everybody can see the screen with the link simulation first slide.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, everything's good.
Like I said, all of this will be posted. It's already posted on Canvas, so you can take a look at it there. So what you're going to be doing is much like the simulation that I think did you just finish up the simulation with the International Business or Marketing course?
We still have a couple of rounds, so we're about midway through, yeah.
Okay. So a good thing about the simulation is that I think that if you're familiar with how it works, then I think that you're already on a part of the learning curve that puts you at somewhat of an advantage. So much like any system, whether it's an enterprise resource planning system or whatever it happens to be, the mechanics are somewhat the same in terms of the engine or the algorithms, as we call it. So you have to get familiar with what the screens look like and what the objectives are. And so in the link simulation, you are going to be managing as a team this, what we consider to be an ongoing high-tech business, and you manufacture set-top boxes. We'll talk about that in just a second, but I want to make sure that everybody received their passcode for their particular company. We have 5 companies that are competing against each other in the one industry that we have. And so in this industry, everybody is essentially at the same position after 3 months. And so you've gotten all of these emails from Dr. Chapman that says that month 3 results are available. One of the questions that I got last night was, do we need to go back and look at months 1 and 2 to figure out, is there a strategy, et cetera? And the answer that I had was no, because each of the decisions are predicated off of the previous month. Some of them have a bit more impactful or longer term to them, but usually the most current one will reflect what's, all the decisions that have been made. And that's what we like about a simulation versus an optimization, which does just a snapshot in time. The simulation is going to take all of those decisions and they keep rolling along. So month 4, which you'll be making on Thursday of next week, the decision is going to be based on the ones made so far in this set-top business. Now, it's been interesting to me because this week, since we moved, one of the primary people that I wanted to get in touch with was our provider, and it seems really odd to call what they do cable, because one of the things that this person asked me is, how many boxes do you need for your residents? And that's what a set-top box is. And so if you wanted to Google it or look at it, I suspect that you have several in your house as well, as we've all gone digital in terms of our media devices. So a set-top box is something that consumers purchase, and typically it's for the home use, although you could use it in a wide range of businesses and offices. You could use it for interactive video conferencing. You could use it for interactive TV. You can also use it as a way to do the local area wireless networking. It can be used for that internet long distance calling, and you can also use it in some cases to control or monitoring a wide range of electrical appliances even, although most of us now I think are going to apps for that we can actually control via our phone. And so these set-top boxes are something, if I think about it, it's much more than cable TV. It really is kind of how we communicate, and it really is our media channels that we use. So in this simulation, you're going to be managing an end-to-end supply chain, and I'll talk about this throughout this short presentation. And that is, you're going to be responsible for making really what I would consider to be a wide range of decisions across these three factors that you see here broadly. So you have two products in your company. One is hyperware and the other is metaware. Now, let me talk a little bit about what goes into each of those. So each of them have common raw materials. So they both have this raw materials called alpha and beta. And they each have epsilon. Now, the recipe for those, we'll talk about that next week, because that really gets down into what I consider to be the minutia of the simulation, and there are a lot of numbers that you'll need to use and understand when we start making that decision. But for right now, the thing that you need to know about epsilon, which is a subassembly, is that it has a 1-month lag when you order it until you receive it. And that's the only one for which we have that timing factor. All the others, if we order them in month 4, they will come in month 5. But if you order epsilon, we're not going to get it. If we order it in month 4, we're not going to get any of it until month 6. Rest assured, you have some already in the pipeline. And each of these products, hyperware and metaware, also have a unique subassembly. Hyperware has gamma and metaware has delta. I think Dr. Chapman likes the Greek alphabet, don't you think, since they all have those names. We sell these set-top boxes in 2 distinct channels. One of them is direct. So if we went online to Amazon, in fact, that's typically when I Google where I can pull up a really nice picture of it, I could simply order it through my Prime account and expect to get it probably within where I live, since it's not really close to a major metropolitan area. It'd probably take a couple of days, even with Prime. Or if I didn't want to do that, I could probably go to Best Buy easily or something like that, and I would get the set-top box as well. And we have those 2 channels that we choose to participate in. We're selling these set-top boxes in 3 regions. The U.S. is considered our home market, and that's where we also manufacture. We are also selling set-top boxes in Europe, and we're selling them in the Pacific. Now, I will say this about the simulation. Simulations are, in general, why we like to use them, is that it gives us a chance to really test a lot of different relationships. And I will tell you, the only thing you can hurt in a simulation is your ego. And so I would encourage you, and I don't think that if you have particularly supply chain experience, that you're at an advantage in the simulation, because it has a lot of different elements that are involved with it. And I think that the team pulling together and having a very good strategy that they execute on is certainly going to be one of the winning components. And you'll find, as it relates to Europe and the Pacific, what you know about consumers in these regions are really going to hold true in this simulation, because it really is a much smaller representation of what I would consider to be real life and the markets as we know them. So if you know that there's certain things about service that Europeans like, whether that's they would rather have it more automated, or if they like more of the personal touch. If I call, I get someone on the phone. So what you've learned in your coursework, or what you know from your business experience about consumers or customers in these regions, will hold very true in this simulation. It almost always seems to me that when I talk to Dr. Chapman, that he's either, as I think I said this when I was with you in January, that he's either in China or he's in, South America somewhere, et cetera. And I think that he very much ensures, because he has executive classes that he does there, that he makes this very real to what those preferences and taste are as it relates to, the customer service aspect of what we're doing. Okay. So this is what your link supply chain looks like. Let me see if I can walk you through a bit of this, and I've talked about some of it already. On the far left-hand side, what you see is Region 1, and you see that distribution center, which is adjacent to the manufacturing plant. This is the one aspect of your supply chain designer network that you cannot change. Does somebody have a question? Okay. And so you'll see it also reflected in terms of the manufacturing, those two channels that we talked about in terms of direct to the consumer or the customer, and we also sell through retail. Now, what you can determine and design in terms of the supply chain to fit your supply chain strategy is depicted in that middle region and in the last or the third part of this graphic. You may choose, depending on the strategy that you adopt for your company, not to have any distribution centers at all. It might very well be that you decide that that is the best way for your team to proceed, because you may decide that whatever the focus is, and let's just say it might be value, which is really a combination of efficiency and effectiveness, that you can do that best by controlling whatever is happening in terms of inventory, the manufacturing operations, by keeping everything in region one. Or you might elect, looking at what the cost implications are, service, and some other things, you might choose to go with that last third of the diagram there, which says that we could choose to open a DC in Europe, and or we could open one in the Pacific. And there are certain ownership parameters that you have. You could either have a 3PL, a third-party logistics firm, operate it for you. And there's certain things that you can do if that's the route that you take. Or you can decide that you want to own the DC in that region. And then there are things that you can do, whether it's related to like RFID technology or whether you want to synchronize with your carriers. And certainly the one that most people find the most interesting one, or an enabler or a driver, I would say, is that you can only do postponement if you own a DC in either Europe and or the Pacific. And as you know, owning a DC has implications for your asset base and really the cost structure in general. So I'm not implying that there's any one structure that's good or preferred. I think it has to pretty much fit your strategy, and you have to be aware of what both the cost as well as service implications are for those. We're going to phase in our decisions in this simulation. So rather than having it all appear like the move when I got home late and I had an event at school, and I came home and I had boxes everywhere and I felt like chaos reigned. With this simulation, hopefully we're going to phase in some of the decisions to get you familiar with how it operates. So you won't decide on whether or not you're not going to have a DC, or if you're going to have one, and what ownership structure that will take, until we have decision 5, and that will be on Friday morning. Okay, any questions so far? If you ask me what this simulation really is all about, it's what I consider to be something like this 4-step process. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to do 4 steps. You've got month 3 results. So you will always get this Word document that has the printout of what the financials and the operating statistics look like. You're going to analyze that, and from that, you're going to make decisions. So that's the planning part of it. Based on that analysis, you're going to make new decisions. Once those decisions are implemented, and I typically refer to that as a simulation run, and we have I have a chart that shows when the decisions will run themselves. Then it takes a very short period of time, generally, I would say 10 to 15 minutes before you get the results back, and then we'll go into another whole cycle of analyzing what happened. We evaluate those results. What actions do we need to take now? And then we just roll from there. And a part of that analysis may be some of the research data that you will have also purchased that's going to help you make better decisions through each of the subsequent months. So if we start at the top here in terms of procurement, this is what this, the decisions look like most broadly in terms of this end-to-end supply chain. So if there's anything I kind of want you to remember from tonight, and I certainly will reinforce this on Thursday, is that I have so many people that look at the simulation and they get so overwhelmed with the screens. And typically the first question I'll get is, where do we start? It's really the plan and the framework has been laid out very nicely for us before with an organization called SCORE, SCOR. It's a supply chain, I think it's Organizational Council. And they were the first to kind of come in and lay out all the metrics for what a supply chain looks like from a process standpoint. But they also boiled it down into what I consider to be 5 essential parts. So where we start is we plan. So even before we talk about procurement, we don't know how much to buy until we know what we think we're going to sell. So the first thing you do in that planning function is that you're going to forecast what you think demand is going to be. So plan is the first thing. Once we know what we think our sales will be, then we're going to be able to procure the raw materials and the subassembly components that will enable us to manufacture the product that we think we're going to sell. Once we have those raw materials coming in and we know what's available, then we're going to be able to set our manufacturing totals. And that will be across products because remember, we don't need to know specifically channels or anything else. We'll determine that when we look at the distribute side of what we're going to do. The transportation involves the modes that we'll be using. We have a choice of 2. We can use surface, we can use air, and we have multiple carriers within each of those that we're able to select from, and they have different levels of service that they offer at different costs as well. The same applies to the procurement side. We have multiple vendors that we can choose from. They also have different prices, and they also have different levels of service and quality as it relates to failure rate that they will provide. And then we'll make service decisions as well. And that's what I talked about earlier about this being a very representative of I think, the particular regions that we'll be selling in terms of the US, Europe, and the Pacific. And that we'll have call centers where it can be very automated, or we'll have a very personal touch. And as you can imagine, the cost also the more involved the people aspect of it becomes, the more expensive it is. So we want to make sure that we're using those wisely because of the cost involved. Then last but not least, one of the last factors that I'm going to turn on in terms of the simulation is the generate demand. And this is why, because I tell you, it has yet to fail that once we bring in 2 of I think the most powerful P's in the 4P model, it really adds layers of complexity. And during the fall, when I was teaching my traditional MBAs that are full-time at UT, we had price wars that started. And I had to go back and just kind of read up on the whole literature about how to coach teams through price wars, because it just really created a lot of bullwhip. And there were some of the teams that just were not able to recover in terms of their performance once that started. So in generate demand, you have 2, as I said, powerful levers, one of which you can change the price for your products, both in the retail channel as well as direct to the consumer. The other one that you can use is promotion. So you have marketing dollars that you can use. And I think a lot of teams find out that those 2 can be they're very sensitive and they have very powerful effects. And as I said, I've learned to really phase that one in last once I think we've gotten very familiar with the simulation and we understand, pretty much how to manage this supply chain that we have. It was interesting in the fall, just as an aside, because we probably need to clear our brains just a little bit. I got a call from Dr. Chapman, and I was in my office, and he wished me a happy 40th birthday. And I thought, well, that's really odd because, I'm a lot older than 40. And it was my 40th links rollout in terms of using the simulation in classes. And so I really felt like, to a certain extent, I know a lot about it, but it seems like every time, every year I do a train the trainer. And so I play the simulation as a team of one, just to keep I think a fresh appreciation for, everything that's going on with that. And so there are a lot of decisions to be made. And so it was funny that that I hadn't even kept track of how many times I had used the link simulation, but it was my 40th birthday.
Mary, congratulations on hitting that milestone.
It's a big one.
That's big.
It is.
Did they send you a bottle of wine or anything with that?
Listen, if you ever meet Dr. Chapman, you will know why there was not. He is just so funny. I had one of my colleagues describe him as, what did he referred to him as any other time he would have been a hermit, because when he goes to conferences, he pretty much sets off to himself. And you think he's, if you ask him a question, that he would reply with a very snappy and short answer, but he's just a lovely man. And I know that he wouldn't like for me to describe him like that, but he's just a really interesting guy. But yeah, I don't think he'll be sending me any bottles. I need one after 40 simulations, right?
Well, that's what Perry's is for.
It is, isn't it?
We can do that this weekend.
We can. I'll be looking forward to that. So it seems like your challenge is pretty straightforward, does it not? You need to improve your firm's performance over time. And the process is pretty straightforward as I'm laying it out. You've got to make these decisions. And as I said, it's really this 4-step process that you're going through, even though you're not going to be really aware of how it happens. We've talked about the fact that your team is competing against 4 other industries. And in fact, before you get started in the simulation, people often ask me, well, how will you know how we're doing in the simulation? We'll talk about the criteria and how that's, graded in just a moment. But with each of those runs, I get back, and it's a weighted evaluation criteria across 14 of them. And they're all weighted a bit differently. Then this algorithm or equation will give me a score out of 100 for each of the teams. And it gives me a score for the current period, and it also keeps track of it cumulatively in terms of how it's weighted. And so that part of your grade on the simulation is really a pretty straightforward one. And I will tell you, I've had something that in the fall that happened that I had not in all the previous 39 times of running it, and that I had in 2 sections, I had 2 teams that were tied statistically. And that's really hard to do because the grade has to be 0.5 or closer in terms of winning. And it's a very tough competition. Let me just say this, that I've done it in terms of my classes on a global basis. So we could be competing against a Penn State. We could be competing against a university that's in Sao Paulo. We've also competed against teams that are in France, and they're just some really fabulous supply chain students that are out there. And yet I find that it's very, very hard for anyone to really get much above about cumulatively about a 91 in terms of overall score. And then so we usually do a slight adjustment from there, either based on the current or what happens. So I'm hoping that with this group, because you guys are very impressive, that I'm going to break that final barrier, which is to have somebody that's going to end up at about the 95 or higher in terms of cumulative score at the end of this period.
Are we competing against each other? Like, does what one team, what they do, does it impact our process?
So let me give you a good example of that. So when I talked about the price wars, you can only imagine what happens if you have, so all of the companies are competing together in the same industry. If one of the companies has a lot of inventory because they've been consistently over forecasting, they may decide, you know what, it's time for a sell, an SELL, right? And so when they put it on sale, SALE, they may determine that they're going to slash their prices. And when they do, you can only imagine if they put some marketing dollars behind that, it can have a tremendous effect in terms of either taking away market share or driving demand their way for that period. And that certainly will affect you when you're going along thinking, you know what, we're going to hold our prices steady or things of that nature. And it may very well be that if there's a disruption in the supply chain or if everybody's using the same supplier, there are a lot of things that the decisions that one company can make will have a ripple effect through for others. The best example for that I've seen, and I think we talked about that, is Apple is well known for if there is a new breakthrough material or if it's a precious metal, they've been known to, instead of looking at co-opetition where they might share with some of their competitors down the supply chain, Apple would just simply go in and buy all of that available supply. Now, you can't do that in this simulation, but it would have similar effects. Or if there was a supply chain disruption for one, we've also had some some competitors that would also be willing to share what supply base that they have, because they realize we're only as good as the weakest point. So there are all kinds of things that can happen, but there are some interdependencies between the teams, particularly when we introduce those other two elements of the generate demand. That's a great question, by the way. And you can tell kind of what's going on because you can buy the marketing research, and you certainly can tell who's doing what relative to both of those P's, as well as you can buy other information that would suggest or show you what carriers they're using, et cetera. So you can do quite a bit of what I consider to be business or market intelligence through buying some of those reports. I like to look at this process view of links because it gives me an idea about, remember when we talked about you make decisions and it impacts certain outcomes. When we're making customer-facing decisions, when we talk about that service, when we think about product availability and those channels that we sell through, we certainly on the supply side by choosing the suppliers that we're going to use. The forecasting, and let me just mention here that the forecast error, whether it is low or high, that error is costly, and there is a cost penalty for not having accuracy in the forecast. And so we will spend some time on Thursday talking about how to manage demand. You will make information technology decisions. Other decisions, I think the most important one, and I think we already have a team, was it Team Awesome that I heard? So each of the companies need to pick a name, and you'll see in a minute when I go to the demo that I have up that we have one called, I think, the Tennessee Volunteers. And so we always have some iteration of that in one of our teams. And then, as I said, we can also buy research studies so we make better decisions because we know what our competitors are doing. It affects all kinds of outputs that you see here on the right-hand side. It affects what I would consider to be the financials. What I like about this class that we have, this cohort, is that we have a lot of people that have, I think, a depth of knowledge on the financial side. And I think you're going to be really a great contributor to the team, because if there's any area of opportunity for us in supply chain, I think our greatest opportunity is becoming more financially savvy. The firms talk in dollars or whatever currency it is, and yet in many cases we concentrate on that right-hand side, the supply chain management operational side, because we're what I consider to be the box kickers. So we know a lot about inventory, certainly we know about fill rate, we're managing the operations in the manufacturing side, we know all about transportation, but in many cases we have difficulty translating that back to things like our profits, or what we might look at in terms of our return on assets or return on investments. And so I'm looking forward to the mix of teams that we have. And then we have the product-specific outcomes. And we have things like market share that we want to manage. We're looking at the change in that, as well as we have customers that will tell us what they think about our product. And you'll see that their perception after both of those, the product quality as well as the service quality, because you know that we may have a really good product for whatever reason, consumers may not be convinced of that. And you'll notice that also availability has a perception. You are penalized in this simulation if you do not have product available, although a large percentage of it will still convert to back orders if you can make that product available as well as meet your current period demand. And of course, we like to have satisfied customers because we know that they become loyal customers and they continue to buy, and they're less susceptible to be, drawn away from us if there's other factors are in place. So it may not just be driven by price. I think I said this before, you're all in identical positions as the simulation begins. You are statistically all the same. Although, and I'm not encouraging you to do this, because remember, it's just like going golfing with somebody or heading off to an NBA basketball games. You may talk to somebody that is a friendly competitor, and you may just divulge something for which you think is fairly innocent, but you'd be surprised what it may enable somebody to know about what you're doing. So these identical positions are, as I said, statistically the same, although there is some small variation between them. And so when you make the decisions for month 4, that's when really those identical positions, you are in control of your company when you make those decisions for month 4. And that's how we can tell exactly what it is that you've added in terms of value to this company. I think Bill Gates said it best. There's a lot about him that, if I've read his biography and other things, but he, I think, believed in a couple of things very early before we even formalized them in terms of education. And that is this whole idea of analytics. And to do analytics and to be able to use it, you have to take data and you have to turn it into information. So that means that you have to gather it, you have to manage it. And most of all, when we talked about the analyzing and using it, certainly I think I agree with him when he says that will determine what I consider to be whether you win or lose in this game that we call business. Okay, remember I talked about how we're phasing in the decisions. So on Thursday when we meet, we've got group time that's set up. I think if I looked at the schedule that's posted at 11, you'll break out into your groups, and the decisions that you will be responsible for by the time we finish our session at 12:30 is that obviously you're going to plan, so you're going to be doing forecasting, you're going to be ordering raw materials and sub-assembly components, you're going to be setting manufacturing levels, and then you're going to be determining things like information technology. At 12:30, we'll go to lunch, the simulation will run. We'll come back on Friday morning, and at 8 o'clock, I may make a few comments or remarks, but you'll go right into your group, and at 9:30, we'll reconvene because that second or decision or month 5 will run, and we'll have a little bit of lecture discussion in between. We will have some more group time because at 12:30 on Friday, your decision 3 or month 6 will be due, and then the schedule goes, and then we'll have a double run on Saturday. So you'll see how each of these decisions, so in month 5, not only will you be doing the forecasting, procurement, manufacturing, so we add each of these to those previous decisions until we get to month 6, and then we're at full functionality with the simulation. Don't get too how shall I say, into or bogged down looking at all of these specific decisions. It's just a way if you're trying to think about, okay, what will we do as a team? How are we going to make these decisions? Should we split up the work? Should we make all the decisions together? Each team will determine what really works best for them related to the simulation, although we would suggest that the first 2 rounds at least that you kind of work together as a team, so you get familiar and you understand more of the interdependencies of the simulation itself. So each of those areas that we talked about, you'll see some of the areas. What I like to use instead is this next slide, which talks about if I'm trying to figure out what is it that I'm trying to do, let's just say in manufacturing. If you look at that block, often I'll ask my questions rather than try to fill in a block and try to figure out, well, do I need to do this? These questions help me a bit with that. So under manufacturing, I'm trying to understand, in addition to scheduling regular volume, am I going to do postponement? And if that's the case, how am I going to use it and how much of it do I need? What's this thing called emergency production? What's it going to do for me, if I'm fairly accurate in terms of my forecasting accuracy? And then I've got to figure out what kind of buffers or what kind of safety stock do I want to have for each of those products that I have for the particular regions or channels themselves. And these questions, I think, if you look at those in kind of combination with the simulation and areas that you have to do some inputs to, then that'll, I think, help you frame what kind of decision. This is the point in time where I want to make this also very clear. If you don't have a firm strategy, then what I find is that each subsequent period, you're trying to chase some optimal decision inputs that will always be elusive. And so I'll give you the best example that I know of a company, or two of them actually, and they're either endpoints that are well known for their strategies. The first one, and it's not going to be any surprise, would be Walmart. Walmart's strategy is always about everyday low price. They do not make even one decision without asking themselves, does this fit within this whole perspective or framework of every day? And I mean, it gets down to the point that their executives, if they're attending the same conference, if they're in the same town, they share a hotel room. That's what the everyday low price means to them, right? And it goes all the way back to how they approach and how they deal with their supplier vendors. And as a customer then, if I shop there, I know that that price is going to be very, very competitive. Now, however, if I'm looking at somebody like a Neiman Marcus, I would expect to have a great deal of product availability. Price is not going to be the consideration necessarily, although I don't think you see what I'm saying? I think it's going to be value. It's not going to be the lowest price. And the customer service is going to be absolutely superb. It's probably going to be the highest that we see. So determine in that first meeting, what is your firm going to be about? And you'll notice that in the mid-cycle review, or you will notice that I'll ask you, what is your firm's strategic approach to the market? Because I think without that, one of my colleagues said you're a little bit like what the rabbit, I think, said to Alice, that if you don't know where you're going, any direction will do. And it really is a bit like being buffeted by the wind. You may not reach your ultimate goal of improving performance. And I think that if you can always test a decision against that strategy, it makes it much easier. I think that one of the hardest strategies to roll out, because it's a balance between cost and service, is the value one. So if I look at companies like the Macy's or Targets, et cetera, where I think they're positioned right in that middle, they really, that's probably, I think, the most difficult one to always, because you're managing both sides of that very, very closely, because you're competing really not with the Neiman Marcus's in terms of service, but really you want to be known for having that service element, and it comes at a cost. I'll just take a short drink of water here in the event that somebody's got a question, because we're about ready then to go to my next screen share, which is to look at the demo simulation that I have. So far, so good? So far,
so good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
All right. So one of the things about the simulation that I like, and why I've used it for so many different classes, is that it really, unlike much of anything else that I've done before, we can do small scale simulations, and I do a lot of those, so like Harvard Business Publishing. But this one really helps you understand what those supply chain interdependencies are. I looked at some research one time that said that most executives, by the time they get to either a VP, senior VP, or even a CEO level, has had in typically about 3 different areas for which they've spent some depth and have some knowledge on. You're going to be managing as this team an end-to-end supply chain across all those areas that we talked about. I can't begin to tell you how many VPs of supply chain, global supply chain, that I've had, and these are individuals that have had 20 plus years experience, sometimes more than that. And they come into the simulation and they find very quickly that while they may know a lot about a particular area or a couple of particular areas, that managing it all is really a very different animal. And so I would encourage you, like I said, the only thing that you can hurt in this simulation is your ego. And I would just say, let's just have some fun and learn about how all of these things happen. And it gets kind of, it doesn't get kind of, it gets competitive as the simulation goes along. And I think it's probably the best non-teaching that I do is to facilitate the simulation to see where people are. Gives you a chance on the operational side to look at postponed production and either the power or the angst of having that and how we really deploy that with our transportation decisions that we make, and even our supply chain design, how it impacts all of that. And so, as I said, this simulation is really good for helping you understand what those relationships look like. I talked about the fact that every simulation run, I get this scorecard that will, and I've had teams ask me, so what is our score? And I typically don't reveal that. Really, I don't. But it is based on these in the manual. And let me hold this one up. So when you get to campus on Thursday morning, one of the first things that will get you is this hard copy of the manual that currently you have as a PDF form. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's chapter 15 in this manual. It is. It's performance evaluation. And it talks about all of these performance metrics and the scorecard. As I said, there are 14 of them. They're weighted differently. The financial measures, particularly if you look at that net income to ratio, is one of the most heavily weighted because our shareholders and stockholders are very interested in getting a return. And so it is heavily weighted. But you'll notice that some of the others will be as well. If we look at the third bucket here, which is the customer measures and customer satisfaction, that's also important. So if you would take a look at that chapter 15, there won't be a test or a quiz or anything on them, but just be aware of, out of these 14, they're not all equally weighted. And as I said, the algorithm or the equation takes all of these, weights them accordingly, looks at the competition, and then assigns points from there. So it's a fairly comprehensive scorecard that we have. Now, if you've ever worked on a system that was an AS400, what you will see here with this Firm 1, the Tennessee Volunteer, it looks so familiar to that. It's like a courier type font, is it not? And so this is what you will see. This is the report that you get each and every cycle once the simulation runs. And you'll see those three broad categories that we just talked about: the financial, the operational, and the customer. And you'll notice your firm, whether you're firm 1, 2, 3, or 4, and you'll notice it'll have your name up there, but it will give you your statistics, and then it will give you statistics for the industry: worst, average, and best. Now, let me make this also clear that you cannot, I don't think, be successful managing your company on just this data. That I really don't see how, if it's available, that you can't, I don't see how it's possible to be successful and not buy additional research data. But this is just a really good, what I would consider to be generalized or overview of how you're doing relative to the competition. And then you can buy much more specific information, and that'll be clear because there's a whole chapter on research reports. You also have a dashboard, and so when we talked about the simulation being based on previous month's decisions, this is part of the Excel file that you'll have available, and this will be important to you when your team will do a final report. And in many cases, the appendix is longer than the written document itself. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can simply go into your links, reports, and download some of these graphics and just bring them straight into your report when you're talking about your performance. Things that you thought you did well, things that if the simulation had continued, that you would work on to improve, etc. So we have this dashboard available to us as well. So where would you get started? As I said, I'll talk about this more on Thursday when we break out for our first group meeting. But as I said, I'd prioritize what the list is. There's a bit of a time crunch, and I do it that way to make sure that, that there is this element that, time really does not wait for any of us in a global business environment, and that we do have to make decisions. And so, as I said, I would advise you to work in your group at least through the first 2 decisions as a group. And then after that, depending on how comfortable you are, certainly you can have specific areas of responsibility. Now, I'm going to make sure that I manage the time tonight because I know that all of you have had long and very busy days, and tomorrow is another work day. So I'm going to stop the share here. One last thing before I do that, though, if you have some extra time, you're watching the Super Bowl and it's a blowout, and I'm hoping my Atlanta Falcons are going to be winning at that point in time. If you go to the links-simulations.com, Dr. Chapman has a wealth of material there, like frequently asked questions. He has some other things that you could look at. And as I said, he's been adding to this over the years. And so there's a lot of material there and also look at your firm and some of those results and just walk through the screens, because I think that that's part of the steepest part of the learning curve with the simulation. Okay, so let me do a share screen. I talked about several things, one of which was this decision schedule. And so I'll show you what this looks like. So the first decision's due at 12:30, and I think I'd already said that we'll break at 11, so we'll have an hour and a half. We start at 8 o'clock on Friday, and so we'll have till 9:30 to do that second decision. And I think we also have, I've allocated probably another hour and a half for the Friday one, and then you'll see how we'll do accordingly. By the time we get to Saturday, because we're old hands, we will not be using an hour and a half, but the schedule is posted in this, the syllabus and the module that I've already set up for the course. Okay, so at this point in time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and I had a hard time doing this last night, and I'm not sure why that was the case. I'm trying to go to my screenshot of the link simulation. So bear with me a moment to make sure that that is still up. It's there. So let me see if I can go back and share the screen with that now. I don't know why this is always so difficult, but there's something about when you go to another kind of window in the Chrome, it's, go to the desktop and see if that'll work. Okay, are you seeing the screen that shows the 4 different simulations, link simulations?
Yep.
Very good. So one of the interesting things about this is that I do not have a live simulation. So, you know, I'm going to demonstrate or look at the screens with you through the demo. But if you have a question, I typically sit down with you and say, show me your screen and what you're talking about, because I don't have the ability, even though I have the password, I don't go in and look at any of yours. So I don't have the ability to be, you know, either that, you know, 4th or 5th team member in terms of things. So I'm just going to go here to the demos to look at that. And I'm going to go to supply chain management. And we're going to do that one. So your screen will look like this, and rest assured that you will only have the decisions over here that will actually reflect the decisions you can make for that particular period. So this particular demo is in, it looks like, is it month 6? And so one of the things, or maybe month 7, that they can do is that they're at full functionality, and that's why you see all of these different things. Remember when we said that where we start is that we start with planning, with the forecasting? So I'm going to click on that particular one. And this is what, you know, so when you start, you'll pull this up in terms of the screen. And you'll notice here that you have some that are just simply the numbers are in the white, and then you have some that are in green. What you'll find out is that the green ones, and you'll look down at the bottom, there's this footnote that says, forecasts that have not been updated or changed since the previous month are displayed in that green background. There is no rule that says that you have to change any number from one decision round to another. And in fact, you know, this is a way to make sure from a color coding that we know which ones have not been. And as I said, so that's the kind of the guide that we can use for that. So it looks like in this particular one that they've changed channel 1 and region 1 for the US. They've changed both channel 1 and 2 for product 2 in Europe, and so forth. These numbers, and there is a process to how we're looking at this, because you'll notice that we have all of this and how it rolls together by product and by region. So once we make those forecasts, we said the next thing that we want to do is that we want to do ordering of our raw materials and subassembly components. So if I click on that raw materials, if you'll notice already, see what we have here in terms of, if we look at what's going on in terms of those raw materials that we need, that's where we'll order it, because we also have our production that's set as well for looking at this. And it will give us a beginning inventory, and it also tells us, based on what that production is going to be, what the ending inventory will be. So once we do that planning and the raw materials, then we said what we're going to look at is the manufacturing. We're going to look at the make. See the forecast for the region 1, and you'll see that those numbers that we put in under the forecast are showing up here in the green itself. And in this particular one, we also have some plant shipments that are being made, but that's because in this demo, it really is far advanced in terms of the month for the particular simulation that we're looking at. Remember, we talked about the emergency production level and the production volume flexibility. You'll also notice that we have the product 0 here. This particular firm is actually using some product 0, and they are also doing production for 1 and 2. You'll notice that in terms of those forecasts that are also coming in here and their ending inventory, you've just noticed those amounts. And as I said, that's when we have a strategy for product availability based on our service levels that we want to offer our customers. So all of these numbers will flow together, and that's why I said there is an absolute strategy or process to how we follow that. And then you'll notice that our sub-assembly components and how we order those, and you'll see there's our gamma, delta, and epsilon that we're looking at in suppliers. And if you notice here, you'll see the production orders and estimated replacement parts. So the system is acting like an ERP and really to a certain extent an advanced planning system because it's rolling those numbers through. So if you don't use that process of the forecasting or the planning, and then we do the procurement, and then we do the make and distribute, the numbers are going to not necessarily, it will be much more difficult to keep track of what's going on. You also have the ability in this simulation, when everything's all said and done, to do the pro forma financial projections. I had a team once, and I had one of those really senior VPs of global supply chain. And that person, when they changed the price, they did not do a check on their input. And they ended up, instead of a 3-digit price for one of their products, they ended up, I think instead of like $362 per unit, somebody inadvertently typed in a 1 in front of the 3, which made it $1,362. Not only did they not sell any products, but they ended up going from first place to last, and they never recovered. Well, the VP wanted me to call Dr. Chapman and insist that he rerun the simulation since it was a mistake that they did not need to make. And I will tell you right now, Dr. Chapman says there are no do-overs in business or in life. And so it's just one of those things that in business, things like that happen. But if they had done the pro forma statement, I think that they would have seen very easily that, for one thing, their sales volume would have, and the price would have shown up there, and that would have been a way for them to audit to ensure that their numbers looked the way they should have. So I look at the pro forma, but just realize it's based on what you think your sales volume is going to be, but they certainly would have caught it there, and they would have also seen it in the revenues, because you can imagine that if you had charged for product one $1,410, that revenue would have been very, very large. So the pro forma is just a way very quickly to ensure that you don't have a spurious digit, or by the same token, you didn't put in $36 or $46 for something and didn't intend to do that. So I use these fairly often just to see what's going on or what my decisions look like. Okay, let's see. I don't know if I can do the back key and get back. The thing about the demo is that it does have, now I'm back. So that's the sub-assembly components. And as I said, we'll see all of this come into effect when we use the simulation on, let me say this again, on Thursday afternoon.
So Mary, just to clarify, so we'll go by each round, the specific items, like the procurement and forecasting on the first round, and then the distribution and transportation second.
Absolutely, and you will only see for what is available for you to make decisions on. So if something is not available for that particular decision round, you will not see the screens to be able to make the decisions on that. I'm trying to get back to the, yep, so there's firm name as well. So when you get to the screen itself, then what you will find is, and save the input changes as well, that you will not be able to make decisions unless they're a part of that. So I'm going to return to the front page. So what you will see here in this input area are only those decisions that you're able to make each period. And remember, I talked about the Word doc results, the one that we looked at, and you'll notice they're available for all the months. And the Excel results, which was the dashboard, they're all there as well. We are really at the hour, and so I'm going to ask if there are any questions that you might have as we're finishing up this session. As I said, my advice to you is this: if you get a few minutes, please, I would say read the manual. I'd say review the manual. Just be familiar as you're looking through that, because there's so many numbers. For example, how much do I have to order to get a quantity discount on alpha and beta, which are commodities? And what kind of discount is that? Well, it only applies to the units that are over that amount that qualifies you for that. If I'm planning a production run, how much can I increase it by each period? That number is 10,000. And then if I want to do an entire production run, how many units do I make before I have to add another shift? Well, that's 50,000. So if I make 50,000, if I plan 50,100 units, I'm going to have a shift that's going to be busy. And then I'm going to have a shift that's only going to make 100. That's going to be pretty costly. All of those things and the very specifics of that, you'll get into that. So don't spend the time between now and Thursday, trying to get all of those small pieces together. But just as I said, look through the manual. If you have a few minutes, just spend a few minutes perusing the simulation itself for your particular industry. And then we'll have a chance on Thursday to answer questions. And as I said, you'll have time in your team to walk through it as well. It's kind of a lot to digest, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a bit in there.
And the reports, find the market intelligence reports, and those are only available during the rounds?
They will be. So you'll order those. And as I said, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes. The good thing about being on Pacific Standard Time is that almost everybody else is operating on either Eastern Standard Time or even earlier in terms of Europe. So we're one of the few teams, and it tends to run really fast, and we have small group. And so any research reports that you ordered will be a part of that Word document and available pretty quickly for that next round of decisions. Some of them you can get when you purchase them, so they're available for you to use during that time, but most of them will come as a part of that Word document after the simulation runs. Like price sensitivity is one. I mean, and there's a whole chapter on those research reports. And I think that I've seen two extremes. I've seen groups that don't order very many at all. They order only a few. And then I've had groups that order everything. And I really don't think that's a good use of your company money as well, because you just simply don't have time to digest all of them.
Are there any that you think are the most valuable?
Oh, I would never tell you. I will tell you this. The price sensitivity, particularly when we start with the two powerful levers in addition to the place, which is what supply chain is, and certainly we impact the others as well, but the price and the promotion, the price sensitivity report, but it takes some really kind of getting familiar with as well. And it's very expensive because you buy it by product, by region, by channel. And they're very costly.
All right.
So that's my fave. But as I said, I have to make sure I have the time to devote to that. Anything else, guys?
No, thank you very much, Mary.
Like I said,
appreciate it.
Just write your questions down, and we'll have a chance on Thursday to answer those. And I'm the roaming facilitator and consultant, and I'm happy to answer those questions for you. as I said, I'm excited about coming back. It's just a really, really great group. And so I'm so looking forward to it. And I can't tell you the last time I looked forward to flying from the East Coast to the West Coast, but you guys make me very happy that I'm coming there again next week.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing you as well.
Okay, take care. I'll send out this link and I'll send it to the entire class, but good job for hanging in there for this whole hour and a little bit more, and I'll see you guys next week. If you have any questions.
Okay, good luck on Sunday.
Please let me know, okay? It sounds like you don't think the Falcons are going to win. I don't think the odds are in your favors, are they?
No, that was an earnest wish of good luck. I don't know. It should be a good game.
Well, I think
obviously, yeah.
My son always looks
Brady's been tough to beat. But.
He has, and the spread is 7, if I recall. So I just want it to be a good game. I mean, now that Peyton is retired, and to me, I just want a good game, all right?
Yep, yeah, likewise for sure.
Okay, guys,
Okay.
we'll see you
Great.
next week.
See you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.